Welcome back, I'm E.G. and this is episode 4? Yeah, I think we're at episode 4 of Conlang 101. This week we're going to be talking about syntax. So now that you've gone through and sort of figured out the sounds of your language and what sort of words you want and what you need, it's time to start putting things together. And that's where we get into syntax. Syntax is the grammar of a language. It is how things go together in a sentence. And honestly, every language I've ever learned, natural language or con language or whatever, the syntax is extremely complicated. Natural language syntax is one of the most difficult parts of any language. I have learned, I'm on my 6th language at this point, so I have a fairly good grasp of syntax, but honestly, I mean, there's always something new to be learning. And that being said, this video is not going to cover everything. Just be aware of that. It takes years and years to understand all of the properties of syntax, and if you really want to go in and make that fully fledged language, I suggest doing the research from a syntactician point of view, and yes, that is a real job. Syntacticians, yeah, that's a real thing. So go and research that from a truly linguistic perspective. Compare natural languages. I mean, honestly, it's a fully fledged thing. Tolkien took years to do his language, and he can honestly speak that language like any other language you would have. Klingon also took years to develop. There are a huge number of different features that you have to consider when dealing with syntax. You've got things like word case, noun case, you've got nominative, accusative, genitive, dative, ablative, locative, instrumental, blah blah blah, etc. And you've got things like word order, subject, verb, object, verb, subject, object, verb, object, subject, subject, object, verb. I mean, whatever. It's extremely complicated. With that, you have verb tenses, things like the perfect tense, the present tense, simple present tense, the simple past tense, hold on, I got this, future perfect tense. I mean, it's not just, oh yes, this happened now and that happened then. It's really complicated. And so given all of these things are just the basics of a language's syntax, guess what I'm not going to be doing? Going through all of the super complicated bits. Now, I am going to be talking about some of the very generalized basic pieces, such as case systems, such as tense systems and word order systems, and even that is going to be way pared down. If you have any specific questions about any of this stuff, send me a message. I will do my best to answer it. Just know that this is going to be the uber basic, let's just put a few sentences together sort of a thing, some things to consider, syntax style. And yeah, syntax is fun. I like it. In the world of syntacticians, many of them use things like trees to diagram a language. I don't do that because I find the trees to be incredibly obnoxious. They are subjective to a very large degree. The constraints on them are very frustrating, and I find it to be more useful to go through and not diagram a language by trees. So instead, I'm going to go through a very basic form of case systems and tense systems, and then I'm going to touch very briefly on a few other things you might want to consider when putting your language together. Now that I actually have my Eloic notes, I can actually do this video properly. Because, yeah. Anyways, let's start with the case systems. So cases are nouns and their modifiers. They can occur by changing word form or word order. English is a primarily word order case system, although it does have some holdover from earlier evolutions of the language to where it was a more word form case system. Honestly, yeah, English is one of the most complicated languages out there, so it's perhaps not the best example to study if you want a generalized syntax structure, but we're going to try it anyways. So let's start with the nominative case. Now the nominative, it's hard to say quickly. The nominative case is the case of the subject. It is the thing that is doing something. For example, in English, the cat meowed. The cat is the nominative. It is also in the subject place. It is in, the first part of the sentence, and it is in subject form. The pronouns in Eloic, I'm going to go through and they have different case endings, so they follow the standard word order of verb, subject, object, but change case endings depending on the case. For Eloic, a simple sentence in the nominative form would be ta nerue. Yes, okay, Eloic is subject, object, verb, word order. Yeah, ta nerue. So I watch, I see. That is in the subject form as well as the subject position. For Eloic, the accusative case is the case of sort of I'm going to call it the sort of recipient position, action performed by the subject for X. It is, you know what? I have a better way of talking about this. Accusative case can be something that affects the world, that sort of a thing. That one I have a harder time with because it's different in different languages. So, for example, an English sentence in which the accusative case occurs is I gave the dog a bone. I gave to the dog the bone. The dog is the accusative case. It is in the accusative position. In other languages, it takes the accusative form. In Eloic, I haven't really gone through and messed around with the accusative system all that much, but the pronouns take an N at the end, so tine is the first person pronoun I, so I haven't really messed around with accusative all that much. All I know is the form in Eloic, but I can say things like I gave the dog a bone. It would be I gave and then dog, whatever the noun for dog is, which I haven't figured out in accusative case, would require that extra N on the end, and it would take the place. So you'd have the subject, and then it would take the object position, and then the verb. So I, the dog, the bone gave. And you could tell by the end of the form that it would be in the accusative case. The next case I'm going to talk about is the dative case. That is the case of the object. Using the same English sentence, I gave the dog the bone. The bone is the dative case. It is the object. In Eloic, I have dative as plus an R at the end, so it would takes the same form. You'd say, okay, I, the dog, the bone gave. The dog, would have the plus N for accusative, and the bone would have plus R for dative. And that word order would also indicate the case system, and then gave, of course, being at the end, because verbs are at the end for me. Yep, always fun. The fourth case that I'm going to talk about is the genitive case, and this one is one of the more complicated ones. It's also great fun. It is the case of possession. So things like the book of Sue's book, those are genitive forms. In English, you have of X, so the book of X, that of X is a genitive form, and also the apostrophe S, Sue's book, X's book, that apostrophe S, and then the object. Those are also genitive forms. In other languages, of course, they have different word forms. For the genitive in Aloiach, I have a voiceless S, so S at the end. For example, okay, the phrase her man would then be Ros Sachai. It's going to have the same word order because it is the subject form in the first position and object in the second position. Anyways, so you have to, okay, when it comes to case systems, those are 4 of the more basic. However, not all languages have all cases. English, for example, technically has those cases based on word order, but you don't see it a lot in word form. Other languages like Finnish have 15 cases that you have to worry about. I have a list here. Hold on, let me find the Finnish cases. Here we go. They have genitive, essive, partitive, translative, inessive, elative, illative, adhesive, ablative, allative, instructive, commutative, abessive. I mean, those are just, you know, plus the nominative accusative case. It is just like, wow, ridiculous. The case system is very complex. Most of the time, for people doing conlangs based on their original language, they use the same system. So in English, you'd be most likely to use word order as your determining factor, and I, in fact, do that a fair bit with Aloiach. It's mostly word order, and then just those very few endings on different words. So these things, they're very subjective. Make it as complicated or as simple as you want. I mean, honestly, you could just have everything based on context, you know, with the thing that you say first being the most important part of the sentence. It just depends on what you're looking for. If you want to be really complicated about it, go study Finnish. I mean, wow. But no, really, do go and study a language, figure out what you like, what you don't like. I borrow a lot from English and German for my syntax, things like that. The inverted word order, that one's mostly just because I can. So once you've figured out word order and case systems and whatnot, you're going to have to deal with your verbs. And the way you deal with verbs is by conjugating a verb, and also by putting them into tense form. So in English, again, we don't really have verb conjugations, except for is it singular or plural, or first person, second person, that sort of a thing. I dance, she dances, he dances, they dance, that sort of a thing. That's a verb conjugation system. I have a fairly basic verb conjugation system that appears in most languages, where you've got a first person singular, a second person singular, third person singular, and then first person, second person, third person plural. You see that a lot in English. A lot of them are the same, and mine, everyone is different. I have things like ending with a, u, ein, un, and on. So the plurals just add that extra n at the end. So once you've got your verb conjugation system down, you can then create sentences based on word order, case order, and the conjugation. However, you kind of also have to take into account tense system, unless you just want to write everything in the present tense. Or if your language doesn't have a tense system and you are, again, basing things on context. That would be saying something like, yesterday I go to the store and pick up eggs, or 3 years in the future I go to the store and pick up eggs, or today I go to the store and pick up eggs. It's all the same tense, but you have that extra time aspect to tell you what sort of time you're going to be participating this, or in executing the verb. So in English, we have a few different tenses. People like to categorize them as past, present, and future. Within each one, there are multiple versions of that. Like the present tense, you have things like she dances or she is dancing. Those are two different tenses. The past, she danced, she was dancing, she had danced. Was dancing indicates that it was happening at some point. She danced, also again happening at some point. She had danced is indicating it's a completed action. Those are three different tenses. In the future, three different tenses also. She will dance. She is going to dance. She will have danced. The will have is a sort of conditional subjective. 3 days from now, if she doesn't break her leg, she will have danced the recital. That sort of a thing in the recital, because prepositions. So this tense system can also change depending on the verb. In some languages like German, you have modal verbs, the should, would, could, which change things. That's always fun. Eloia has no form of to be in the present tense, so it only occurs in the past tense or future tense. So things like she is dancing, that doesn't exist. It just is she dances. That sort of a thing. I haven't played around a huge amount with tense systems in Eloia because most of what I need is in the present tense. So between the case system, tense, and word order, you have a basic understanding of a generalized structure that you can use to put your language together. As stated, things can get very complicated or they can be very simple. Whatever you do, please try to make it consistent. Otherwise, you're going to end up with something like English, which is based off of the adoption or absorption, depending on what perspective you're looking at it, of several different languages, as well as evolution over a very long period of time, which ends up turning English into one of the most complicated languages out there, with Russian and Hebrew and some of the other languages like that being slightly more difficult. Just because, in many cases, Finnish. Anyways, if you want to have a super complex language, go for it. If you want to have those inconsistencies, have at it. Just know that you have to be consistent in your inconsistencies, otherwise your language is going to change every time someone speaks it, which could be a thing, if you really want it to be a thing. I mean, look at some of the Star Wars languages. The words don't mean the same thing twice. It's cool. It's all context-based, and that's definitely a possibility. I personally like a little bit of structure to my language, but I'm weird, and that sort of a thing. So there's a huge amount to deal with. Things like adjectives. Do you want to have them conjugated with a noun? Do you want to have them in a different word order? You've got things like plurals or counted nouns. Gender and verb conjugation. Do you want to have a language with a gendered system? In my language, it doesn't really matter all that much because I don't have gendered nouns and I don't have gendered pronouns. He, she, and it are the same pronoun, ro, that sort of a thing. For the more involved things of a language, I recommend looking up some resources. I have used this one. That's hard to see. Oop. Try that. So I have used this one a lot for the grammar system. I find this to be one of the more useful language Conlang kits that talks about grammar. There are other ones out there that talk about grammar, but they make it a little complicated. I mean, it's extremely complicated, but still, there's no need to add to it, in my opinion. But there are loads and loads of resources out there. It just depends on what you're looking for. If you have any questions, you can ask me. I'll try to steer you in the right direction. It just depends on what you want. If you have any other questions, do let me know. This is not an easy subject. Syntax is one of the most complicated pieces. Well, until you get to the actual use and meaning of language, because that's entirely different also. Yeah, let's just, I think lexicon was perhaps the easiest piece of linguistics. Yep. Anyways, if you have any questions, do let me know. I hope you enjoy going through and putting your words together. It's fun. It should be fun. If you're not having fun, then maybe relax, take a step back, take a break. Go watch a movie with Conlangs in it. Go watch, Star Trek or Game of Thrones or whatever. And just sort of say, okay, this is cool. And then you can maybe go back into it and have fun again. If you have any questions, do let me know. As usual, I will put resources and my links in the description box below. You can find me on all of the usual places on the internet. If you're interested in books about language, might be interested in Speaker of Words. It talks about language. You can see a lot more of the actual use of Aloyek in there because I'm a nerd and it's fun. Otherwise, that's pretty much all I've got for you today. I will leave you with that confusing array of knowledge, and I hope you have a great day. I will see you next time when we talk about semantics and pragmatics, because let's put two of the most complicated pieces together. Yeah! Alrighty, I will see you next time. Bye.